I'm gonna poke into something that people still to this day talk about, and it's the old narrative of you are the CEO of the product. And I think that's bullshit. I'm not really politically correct with that. I think this is really decremental and also like say right or wrong, but to me, like, I have a strong opinion that this is like the wrong mindset of getting into a product team. Because there's obviously, I think that your responsibility, a PM or as a product person in general, no matter like where you are in the ladder, if you have any ladder in your company, it's obviously to make sure that you move forward.
Welcome to the Product Weekend podcast, where we dive into conversations that inspire and challenge the way we think about product management, leadership, and innovation. In every episode, we explore how to build high-performing teams, foster psychological safety, and lead with purpose. My name is Joao Moita, and today we have an awesome guest with us from whom you'll hear more in just a second. Before we jump in, make sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast platform. And if you enjoy what you hear, leave a review. It only takes a moment and helps us bring even more value to the product community. Let's get started. Francesca, welcome to the Product Weekend podcast. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm great in the dark Stockholm. It's so pitch dark here. It's 2 p.m. Started to get dark, but I'm doing great because I'm talking with you today.
Awesome. Great to hear. So, we are going to dive into a lot of interesting topics around psychological safety, product management, communication, collaboration within teams. But before that, I want to start with something a bit more personal. What's a recent weekend that you really enjoyed?
Recent weekend? How recent? I was just like in a trip to Japan. That one was like one of my highlights for real. And
what was your favorite weekend there?
Oh, the week I was about to say, I'm not sure it was a weekend because the days blurred one into the other, obviously, as happens when you're like enjoying yourself. But I thought it was pretty nice when I was just like entering to a restaurant and I just asked for a table. I was there by myself, and then just two strangers started to say, "Oh, do you want to sit with us?" And I sat with them, and it was the most surreal, lost in translation thing. Because one guy was from the US, moved to Japan. He obviously spoke English and Japanese. Then the other guy didn't speak a word of English. Okay. So we used like the Google Translate app with the microphone, and then I was saying something, it would translate, and the other way around. It was so fun, like just to get to meet those strangers, know about a little bit of their lives, and see how things unfold and how sometimes tech help us in a way that I never used like that mic in Google Translate, and now I know why you should use it. Yeah. So that was really fun.
Awesome, cool, that's really interesting. I think, and as I was also on holidays recently and also had that experience that in a lot of places we went, we got to know both local and international people traveling, and I think it's really cool when you open up to those kind of situations like serendipity, open to getting to know different people and eventually have a great time. So
for sure.
Happy to hear that. Cool. Then can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into this world of product management, and also how your understanding of the importance of team dynamics, of communication, eventually psychological safety, has evolved throughout your career?
For sure. I'm going to give you like the elevator pitch here. But I normally say that I have two careers. So I'm originally from Italy and born and raised in the north of Italy. And I studied and worked in Milan until 2011 before I moved to Stockholm. And there I did something that was a dream of mine. So I work with the fashion industry. So as far as way as you can think about anything digital, and nobody wanted like anything digital. Everybody wanted to be in Milan and be at the shows and see the things and go to the shops. And I was living my best life, a little bit like the devils wear Prada, these kind of things. That was who I was in my 20s. And then at some point, nothing at all related with work, I moved to Stockholm. This was 2011. And basically since then I started to work with product development, but I wish it was like I could tell you the story. Oh, this is really like something that I thought about, that I planned for. No, not at all. Actually, I fell into product from failures. Okay. So I really wanted to go back to work with the fashion world, and I thought, a little bit cocky, a bit naive, that if I had done it in Milan, I could do it in Stockholm. But I had many interviews, I had many doors shut in my face, and it was not the most happy period of my life until I started to think about what I really wanted. And back then there was not such a thing as product management. That's how old I am. And it was like basically like I got a job that in today's terms you would translate into product-led growth. It was about retention. It was like the most important players. It was a community of a game. How to make sure that we will retain and grow that. Yeah, you would call it product-led growth, but it wasn't called like that. But that was the first thing that I started with product, and since then I've been working with it. I've worked with a lot of different industries. I call myself industry agnostic, and obviously every time I change, I see how some things are the same and some things are really different. That's where the all "it depends" that you hear so many times come from. But to your question, how my view has evolved quite a lot. And it's a combination, obviously, of experience, of seeing things, but also back in the days, there was not so much literature about what is product management, what is a product manager supposed to do. So I learned a lot on the job, and also I learned how many things that were beliefs that I had when I just started. Actually, right now when I think back, I was like, what the heck was I thinking?
Can you share maybe one or two of those beliefs, just as an example?
For sure. And I think it's like a lot comes from, I'm gonna poke into something that people still to this day talk about, and it's the old narrative of you are the CEO of the product. And I think that's bullshit. I'm not really politically correct with that. But if I think about myself, maybe the year in this first years where I was product manager, I thought that my role, that actually my job was to make decision. So it's like that. I think that narrative of CEO of the product really taps into that whole idea. You are the CEO, so that like little bit old-fashioned ways, the CEO is the one that decides the direction of the company, and it's like you have the final decision and you like gather input, but then it's up to you. And I think this is really decremental, and also like, say right or wrong, but to me, like, I have a strong opinion that this is like the wrong mindset of getting into a product team, because there's obviously, I think that your responsibility, a PM or as a product person in general, no matter like where you are in the ladder, if you have any ladder in your company, it's obviously to make sure that you move forward, that your product move forward, and you can take away bottlenecks, that you can like do it. But the way I used to think about it, it was a lot about, oh, I protect my team. There's like a lot of this rhetoric. Oh, as a PM, my job is to protect my team. I talk with stakeholders. I put together all the dots. And then I take only what the team needs to know to the team so they can focus. And how are you supposed to work like that? I experienced that you really do not have buy-in. So for the first, you are not able, like literally humanly as a person, of being able to understand all the different angles. If you talk to sales, if you talk to marketing, if you talk to finance, and they all have different angles, you're not able to report the same way that they would be if they go directly to the team. So you give a skewed view to the team. And the second thing is that it becomes okay, I tell you, it becomes like an information bottleneck covered by my own personal bias. So how can that, even if I present a problem space, how can that problem space be accurate? Then the team needs to take it and they only see the last part of it because they are responsible for delivery, or like the how, like I'm the why and then the how. There's a lot of this separation in the old rhetoric, and that's what I used to think. What I came to realize is that in this way you don't really get collaboration, because the team is shadows from one side and the others, I'm gonna call them stakeholders for like simplicity's sake, but everyone else that is also as a big stake in the product are also shadowed. So you basically put yourself in the middle as the bottleneck on both sides. Instead, the point should be like thinking about how can I make sure that the picture is as complete as possible. This doesn't mean that everyone needs to be in all the time. Depends on what is the question we need to handle. Sometimes you need to be like more, I don't know, business heavy, and sometimes we have to be more tech heavy, and sometimes we need to be more user heavy. And like your role is actually to understand which kind of voices are important, how to put them together. And also, and this is like the taking away the CEO deciding things, live with the fact that many times it's not you taking the decision. If it's, let's say, we're dealing with a product and we have to understand how we do it scalably. Yeah, I can, if you will be my tech counterpart, I can tell you what are our time constraint. I could tell you if we have a specific budget about it. I could tell you when the customers expect it. But then at the end of the day, if we want a certain architecture, then the biggest voice that should be listened is the tech one. So it's this difference that I've learned in my career, that it's not all up to me. It shouldn't be up to me, and that's not my job to make it all up to me.
I agree with you that in a good environment, that's the way to go about it. It's not this CEO mindset. It's more a collaborative one, and it's like involving the team in making the decisions. But I've also seen from experience and from talking with other people these situations where the reality is not the ideal one. And I guess that's 99.99% of the teams that are not ideal, and there's always some issues. And in some contexts, at least I had one experience where I felt that there was so much pressure from the stakeholders that it was disrupting so much the work of the team that I had to actively do that and shut them off. Like, you don't talk with the team, stop disrupting them, because they were coming to me complaining, oh, the CFO just came to me to build this. So there I had to play a bit the bottleneck on purpose to avoid the team getting disrupted by this, let's say, aggressive stakeholder. So do you think in some situations that's justifiable, or would you approach it in some other way?
Unpack a second that situation, right? Because I think the important thing is what you feel is your role. In that case, in that specific example that you described, basically like your team flagged to you that they couldn't get work done because they were poked from different ways. So obviously that's a real need there that need to be addressed. And one way is like saying to the stakeholders, they will fix the problem there and then, saying, okay, here's the wall or here's the door, whatever, before knocking, like I'm standing in front of it, you have to pass through me. And that's obviously fixes the issue there and then. And probably, I don't know, you tell me, but probably that team got focused and got something out. Yeah. But if you dig a little bit deeper, the actual challenge there, why are so many people like coming and poking to my team? Because we don't have a common understanding of what is actually important for this team to work with. So if I had to play that PM, I will be, probably what is like short-term, long-term. Short-term, if it's important that we get things out, because that's also a question. What we're working, if so many people are like poking at us, is it really what we're working on the most important thing? So that's the first question that I would ask myself. If the answer is yes, then okay, tactic one, short term, protect them for your life. Fine, so they ship whatever they have to ship. But then step two, tactic two, is you really need to go there, and that's back to the acting, collecting all the different input, to go back to all the ones that were actually poking them and have a discussion. Depending on how the organization is, it could be you, or it could be you flagging to your head of CPO or whomever that there is like a discrepancy, not flagging. I think this is important, not flagging and people are poking at the team. I think you should be doing the work of going to talk with those people and understand what they want the team to do and why it's important to them. If you see that there's that discrepancy there with like people just want random things, that's a thing to escalate. That is lacking like a strategic context that is needed for the team to focus. And at the end of the day, a lot of people, those are difficult conversations, obviously. And if you're a PM, many times you cannot solve yourself those conversations. But I think it's a really, instead of just escalating, which I've seen some people also doing, I think it's good to take the extra step and take those discussions. It will help you get understanding of what those stakeholders, like to put yourself in those stakeholders' shoes. But it will also help you like have or giving you an opportunity to also explain, because that's another thing that I encounter when this situation happens, that there's not a full understanding of what product development means, that disrupting the focus gets like really consequences on the costs, on the time and everything. That's also can be a way of creating a bridge there with those people poking the team.
Yeah, so that approach that I mentioned could be like a first aid situation to solve the immediate issue, but then the core and what would be most important is to address the root cause and understand why is this happening. Is there like lack of trust? Is this miscommunication? Is it lack of clarity in the vision? Or are we working on the wrong things and we should maybe shift focus? So that would be the next step. Cool. And you also mentioned that, so the role of product management, contrary to what you thought in the beginning, is not about making decisions. Then what is it about? What is the essence of the work of product management?
Slightly rephrase, it's to facilitate decision. And sometimes you make them and sometimes you don't. That's not to say, oh, I'm a PM, I don't take responsibility for anything, I just make people talk. That's not the job. I think the job is taking responsibility for your product to actually have an impact. And impact is both for your customers, so making sure that you're actually solving a problem, but that's not enough. You have to solve a problem, unless you're a charity, in a way that makes money for your business, right? So your role is to understand what is the most impactful thing that we can do here, which is the most impactful product, what will make the needle move. So that's one part of the work. You will do it by collecting like different angles and understanding what's the strategy, understanding what is important for the business, those business goals. If you're like out for profitability, it could be one thing. If you're out for growth, it could be another thing. If the retention is important, it's a third thing. What is actually like important for your business? How do you best deliver it? So those are conversation. And then how do you actually ship it? So taking responsibility for that impact is what I think is the role of a product manager, or product as a function in general. The difference is that you don't get there in making all the decision yourself. You get there by having this balance, by knowing like who is needed, whose input do we need, when do we need it, how do we avoid like just those never end this discussion, but we go forward, and what is our decision making process, who decides in what, how much. That's also depend on the organization size, how much is on the PM, how much needs to be escalated, how much do we have forums, like all these things is taking responsibility to create an impact and a fast time to value for your company and your customers.
So it's all about taking responsibility and ownership for the final impact of what you're building, and get there by making sure that decisions are made, not necessarily taking them yourself, but making sure that the right people are in the right place with the right context to make a decision, right?
Correct.
That's the direction. Awesome. And what are some specific strategies that these product managers can use to improve their communication, collaboration in a way that they can facilitate this decision making? Are there any specific directions or tips for product managers to develop these skills and get better at communication and collaboration?
For sure. I think this is the obvious, I don't have any silver bullet here because communication is obviously a people thing. So it depends so much about who are you talking with? What is the culture of your company? What is your area of influence? Who are you as a person? There are like so many variables that plays into it. I'm not giving any silver bullet here for sure, but it's an important component, I think. And sometimes, and I put myself into this as well, that sometimes people working with product are a bit self-absorbed and also a little bit too prone of focus. We also talk so much about focus, which is super important, especially in some stages of companies like pre-market fit. Focus until or you die basically, but then it becomes that you shut down everything else. So if you think about that situation with those stakeholders, maybe you want the focus, you might want to close that door, but the real job is also like to get back to that impact. The real job is to take in those difficult conversations. The real job is to understand, trying to get beyond the frustration that you might get. I've been sitting in so many of these conversations where like, why are those people keep on like asking the same thing when we said why do they want to go right when we said we will go left? And I was so frustrated by this. And the thing is, you should be able, in the best of possible words, my tip will be like to try to really understand where they come from. The majority of people want to do something that they believe it's good for the company. So it's okay, but we said we want to go left. You want to go right. Can you explain why right would be better? What is right actually solving? What kind of money do you see that we're doing? Like having all those questions to understand more what they come from. This doesn't mean that at the end of the day you're going to change direction. But I think it's like from a communication standpoint, that is really important because it creates, you need to be genuinely interested. Obviously, you don't have to fake it, but it creates like this human connection, which is also always so important. That's when we say so many times product management is saying no, which is right. You say no to 90% of the things that come to you, but it's also, and I've done this mistake many times, it's how you say no. If I said, oh, no, this is not strategy, or no, this is not in the roadmap, and the only thing you give to the other person then is frustration. And you don't really create that possibility of talking. So back to your question, I would really like, with all the things that it depends, and depends from also as how you are as a person, but try to have those, really listen to those people, like trying to understand where they come from, their perspective, and really listen to what they tell you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But also, if you have that approach of always asking, always going, trying to go deep into understanding the other side, which, don't get me wrong, it's 100% what makes sense to do. You can also fall into another trap that a lot of product managements fall into, which is taking everything under their plate. So out of a sudden they're having these conversations, the salesperson comes to them and they are like trying to fix this other thing that's completely out of the roadmap, and then when they realize they're working 20 hours a day and dying because they have everything on their plate and they're talking with everyone and trying to solve everyone's problems. So how do you balance that? Do you have is it something, first of all, that have happened to you or that you've seen happening? And how do you balance that, this going deep and being curious and ask questions and caring about the other side and trying to help them solve their problems, but at the same time keeping some sanity and some space for you to work on what's really moving the needle?
I'm really happy that you bring up this, because I think product people are like at heart overachiever. I don't think that they will be doing that job otherwise. And obviously talking with people and like showing curiosity doesn't mean that you have to solve everyone's problem. And it depends, again, I really don't want to say, but it depends on how your organization is structured. Let's say, for example, we take that example that you say, oh, we have a lot of salespeople coming at me. One is like the old say, like you have 10 salespeople coming at you. Obviously, you don't have the possibility of sitting down with 10 people and doing that. Probably the tactic there will be to go to their, I don't know if there's area manager or like sales manager or whatever. They are like, if there is like 10 individual salespeople, like their boss. So, okay, what is the most important? Like asking that person who should be also having in his or her role, having the strategy of that department, what is important, like doing that conversation with one instead of 10. So that's one tip. And that depends a lot on how big your organization is. But you can there as well see, is there a pattern? Is everyone coming from sales? So maybe you can go up one letter. Or everyone coming from marketing, same thing. Or maybe your org is 20 people. Maybe there is worth the effort of talking with all of them. That depends on your context. The other thing is that talking to them doesn't mean necessarily taking more job on you. Let's say that you're talking with this salesperson and this happened to me is, they see a lot of potential in one idea and they would like you to explore it further, right? That's like pretty standard thing that happens. You don't have to take it. You can take, there are like frameworks. I've been working with framing of opportunities or how do we talk about things that pop up, that there is like certain requirements that needs to be filled before a certain opportunity gets brought up to the table. You need some boundaries, for example, those templates or like those ideas that you require those people that come with the idea to fill before you even talk deeper about it. So you took the step of having the conversation, but that you don't take on yourself the entire job of understanding, is this opportunity worth it? Because otherwise you're gonna get yourself burned with paperwork, so to speak. And a way of doing it, there are a lot of opportunity assessment or anything like that probably many people are used to. Or if they're not, like, you can also use forums. We have a forum once a week or twice a week or whatever makes sense as a cadence where we evaluate opportunities. And there are those people and there we say like really quickly yes and no so we can have alignment around that. There are tactics that you can use to navigate those situations.
Yeah, so always being conscious about it and setting some boundaries and some strategies. Just a quick break. If you're enjoying the episode, don't forget to hit follow and leave a rating. Your support keeps us going and helps us share even more insights with listeners like you. Now, let's get back to the conversation. And another thing that I wanted to ask you, or to connecting the dots a little bit here, is with the topic of psychological safety, on how this, on the one hand, how psychological safety impacts communication and collaboration, or the lack of it makes it more difficult to communicate and to collaborate between both people in the team and across teams, but also how can these good communication and collaboration practices improve psychological safety. Maybe to get us started in this, what's your perspective on what is psychological safety? How do you see it taking place in a team?
That's a really good question. I would try to give it as a concrete answer as I can, because the whole concept can feel pretty fluffy or like it's really difficult to grasp. To me, psychological safety can show itself when there's like you are in a meeting and someone is not afraid of disagreeing about something. Or when your team or some members of your team come to you and really flag that there is a problem about, for example, a relationship that is not working, or the stakeholders poking on your shoulder all the time. It's about saying, not being like afraid of speaking up, whatever that means, or even writing, oh, I disagree with you, whomever you is, or being able to flag things that do not work in general. So I think those are all signs of psychological safety. And like the lack of can also manifest in when someone tells you that things are happening in your team and you're not aware of, because that is a sign that people do not come to talk to you. So if something, I mean, it's impossible for any leader to be everywhere and see everything. So that is why it's particularly important that you create an environment where it's like, you can be challenged, people can come to you, they know that you're not gonna go around and gossip about it, and you're not gonna shy away from difficult conversation, and you're there for them. If they don't come to you because they feel like it's too busy, or you never do nothing, or if I tell you then you're gonna tell someone else and then I'm gonna get in trouble, that is no psychological safety. So to me it's all about, and I'm personally always like to have a challenging environment. So for me it's really important to create this group, especially amongst the PMs that I normally work with, where they are able to say when they disagree, when they are able to say when something is really tough, when it's no problem saying, okay, I'm really getting stressed because I have OKR to finish by next week and I'm gonna die trying, but I don't know if I will manage. This is all psychological safety, and it's your job as a leader to actually understand and pick up. And in this example of being stressed, what help can you offer? How can you support them? Is that lead line really important? What else can you take away from their plate? Like, instead of just nodding and saying, oh, I'm sorry, you're stressed, it's the end of the year, everyone is stressed. Because if that is the reaction, the next time they will not come at you. And everything we talked about so far builds on relationships, right? Builds on communication, builds on me feeling that you have my back and the other way around. And this is where psychological safety becomes really important. And in my experience, I think the majority of the product team that I've been working with has been pretty good in creating a psychological safety within the team. I think there's a lot of culture, especially in Sweden, about like listening to everyone, getting everyone heard. There is not really hierarchical environment, etc. So that part I would say is like almost check by default. It's not by default, obviously, it's a lot of work getting into that, but that works. The part that it becomes a little bit more complex is where you think about all the teams that are needed to actually make your product work. So if like you need marketing and you need sales and you need customer support and you need probably someone else depending on what your product is, and many times the psychological safety between those different groups is not really there. And it's also not a lot, I believe that once is because there is not a lot of thinking about the larger group of people that are needed to work with product, that don't work together so much, meaning that they know each other so much, and the only situation when they are there are maybe in those meetings when someone wants a feature and you're gonna say no. So it becomes like really difficult to create this interpersonal relationship, which I believe it's like the core of the psychological safety. And then on top of it, and for me has been many times that I've realized that maybe like you don't reflect too much of what you need or want or what you think it's important, and you take it for granted, and maybe the other person think that something else is important, and then you have a big clash that feels really personal. And when you get there, then it's really difficult to get back to this open discussion and relationship, unless you really to take that, to sit down and basically open up a lot. But because you don't trust the other person, it's not really likely that you're gonna do it.
Yeah. I recently also read this very interesting book about trust, and it's something that you're not like you're always making a judgment on whether or not you should trust this person, and it's the less you trust, the harder it gets to solve that trust issue, because to get it started, it becomes even trickier. Have you ever been in that situation as a leader, that you've seen that lack of trust or tricky relationship between team members, or between a team member and someone outside of the team, and that you have to deal with it or help solve it? Have you been through
and
that
I've also
situation?
been myself in that situation.
Can we try to go around how, as a leader, you can help solve that situation? And first, by identifying and then taking next steps. What can you do as a leader if you see this happening with a team member, for example?
Yeah, in the best possible words, you would like to act to prevent that this happens. And one way of doing it, something that I've been trying I didn't do as a preventive method, but I mean a way of solving the problem. But if I could do it from scratch, I would do it as a preventive method. It's to actually create forums that are cross-functional, where people are actually working together. So it's more intentional that those people working with, not necessarily in product development, are also part of your team. So creating like a team spirit, that's something. Also, another thing that might sound silly, but it solves more problems than you might think, is to create actual social activities with other people in the company. We had, for example, afterworks that were created by different teams together. So they also had to spend time to think about the afterwork. And then they were like having this tea or coffee moments to prepare. And then it would start like sharing, and maybe they had lunch. It's like making sure that you don't only have touch points to talk about work. So to actually getting to know the person that is like on the other side. I think that helps more than one actually realizes. But if you don't have that in place, that I didn't have many time, and I mean, you end up in those situations, I think what happens, and I mean, I've seen it in many people, and I've seen it when it happened to myself, and there it was more difficult to realize it in the spot. But many times what happens is that it feels really personal. So the person becomes like, oh, I say this, you said this, and it gets through you, and it gets more difficult to see things objectively. So I think as a leader, your role there is to start first. My advice will be, if a person is in that situation, he or she is not really thinking clearly. So first if you have this one-on-one, let them ventilate. I don't know, get this 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever minutes they take, let it out, because that's also part of the process. Then the second thing is trying to help them to put things into perspective, and to put things out from a personal perspective into a professional perspective. Many times what I've seen conflict was about different goals, or different ways of interpreting what is important, or different time frames. So that is already a way of starting to frame the problem out of my personal conflict into something that is actually we can talk about as professionals. And once that is done, the thing that I've done many times is do not expect these people to talk with each other, because they will not. Maybe you work with one of the two parties, but the other part is still like on a really personal attack level. So act as a facilitator. What I've been doing many times is like creating like these meetings where we would frame the problem from a as objective as possible perspective, and then we would talk about it, and then we would define like a clear action plan on how to structure it. And after that, we will also have a couple of follow-ups to make sure that those people are actually able to work together. And in the majority of time, it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And it depends on too many factors to give like a ultimate answer how to deal with that.
Yeah.
But that's also a possibility that I think it's important to talk about. When you're in that conflict, not every conflict is, if it became too personal, not every conflict is fixable.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so essentially the first thing is avoid to reach that point, and for that the getting to know the other person on the other side, making sure that we recognize that they're also a human and they're not the devil trying to make everything go wrong. They also have their motivations that generally are aligned with the goals of the company and somewhat to the goals that you have. When it gets to that stage, then the challenge is making sure that people have the space and the moment to address it and to try to remove the personal part as much as possible, right? To make it, okay, this is what happened, this is the situation. Like, try to fix the problem and not the person. It's not like we're not trying to change you or you. It's not you that's wrong, it's the situation that's wrong, and let's try to work together to solve it. So that's the general approach, right?
For sure. And I think, like, just want to add, which I've seen also happening, and it happened to me when I was the person, maybe like previously in my career, like having those problems. As a leader, it's your responsibility to take care of those situations. I've seen too many times that you're like, oh, but this is a personal problem between you and her or you and him. Go and fix it. You're like an adult, fix it. And that's not taking responsibility. Again, back to what is your role. Like your role is to make sure that you create an impact. To create an impact, you need collaboration. If you have people that obviously are in a situation that where collaboration doesn't work, you need to step in and help them. Not fixing them, exactly as you were saying, but addressing the problem, how it is. If you don't take that responsibility, which I've seen like many leaders not taking, blaming, you're like, oh, that's your problem, then you're not doing your job.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I think that's a great place for us to start wrapping up our conversation, also not to make it too long. Just before we wrap up, who is someone you look up to in leadership, in product or not, but a leader that you look up to that you think is creating this good spaces for people to work? Can be someone you've worked with or someone like an author or someone that you look up to.
What a difficult question. But I think product, it's a little bit a different angle. And now I'm horrible because I don't remember his entire name, but this is author. I can look it up and we can put it in the show note. He wrote this book that is called Humankind. And it's a book that I really recommend. It's like human and kind. So basically like reframing your perspective of like how every human is actually kind in its like core. And he makes the cases of, oh, how can, the Holocaust and all these things, how can you say that they were kind? Like analyzing different history moments to see the good in people. And I think I'm not sure I look up to him because I don't know him personally, but that book was really, something that I read a couple of years ago when I was overwhelmed by all the negative chatter around. And it's something that also helped me reframe how I think at work. I always start by assuming good intention, right? When you read something and you're like, oh my God, and my first thing is to answer and be angry, assume good intention. How can you use this? Where is he or she coming from? And that's that's more of a maybe a mental model that I look up to and something that I would recommend everyone to think about.
Awesome. It's Rutger Bregman, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's him.
Probably not pronouncing it correctly.
No idea how you pronounce it.
Cool. Awesome. We'll add it to my to read. Awesome. Nice. Cool. Francesca, it was awesome chatting with you as always. Thank you for taking the time for sharing your experiences and your insights with our audience. Just finally, if people want to reach out or learn more about you, what's the best way?
It's great chatting with you, and you can reach me, either you can find me on LinkedIn, that's probably the easier way, or my website, which has my name, which is francescacortesi.com, but LinkedIn is probably easier.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. It was an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Product Weekend podcast. We hope today's episode sparked some new ideas and inspired you on your journey. If you found it valuable, be sure to follow us and share the podcast with others who might benefit. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us an email at team@theproductweekend.com. Until next time, keep learning, leading, and making an impact. See you in the next episode.